Again, welcome to Statistics with Microsoft Excel. In this lectures, we're going to cover the frequency distribution using Microsoft Excel. And we are going to summarize quantitative data. In our previous lectures, we discussed the qualitative data or categorical data. So our main objective in these lectures is to summarize data for quantitative variable. Normally, quantitative variables are numerical values that indicate how much or how many. Example would be the age of a person, 25 years, or the weight of an item. So it's a numerical value. So to summarize the data for quantitative variables, again, we can use the frequency distribution. Also, we can find the relative frequency and percent frequency distribution, same as the qualitative data. The formulas are the same, but the process of the frequency distribution will be a little bit different, and we will see it now. Then also we're going to learn how to plot a dot plot and also histogram, and then stem and leaf display. So we start with an example here. The example is a Sanderson and Clifford. This is a small public accounting firm, and they want to determine the time in days required to complete year-end audits. So they take a sample of 20 clients, and this is their data. So the first client take 12 days, we have 15 days, 20 days, all the way to 13 days. So this data set again is 20 different values, and each value represents the number of days it takes a client to audit. So to organize this data using frequency distribution, we say there's 3 steps that are very necessary to define the classes for the frequency distribution with quantitative data. In qualitative data, example, I have different colors of a car, blue, yellow, green. We cannot find an interval. Either the car is green or is yellow, not between yellow to green or between red to black. But with frequency distribution using quantitative data, we're going to have an interval. So here we can see values, and the values of the days it takes for auditing changes, 12, 15, 20, 22. So we can arrange this what we call it classes. So I can say, okay, between 10 to 15, how many clients have that range, that the number of days between 12 to 15? Because if we say we are going to arrange it individually, it will be too long. We can't see the pattern. So we are going to find what we call the class weight. And so if I take from 10 to 20, then the next one, the weight from 10 to 20 is 10. So the next one should be maybe 21 to 31. It should be 10. The weight of each class will have to be the same. And we're going to see some example here. So step 1, we are going to determine the number of non-overlapping classes. What we mean is that I don't want to have a class from 10 to 15. Then the next one will be 14 to 20. There's overlap there. That means 14 will be in 2 classes. It will be between 10 to 15, and it will be between, let's say, 14 to 20 or whatever. So we don't need non-overlapping, which means each value should have only one class. Now, the next, we need to determine the weight of each class, and the weight of each class must be constant, the same value. Then we determine the class limits. So we're going to have the lower upper limits. Now, it's based on the data. For example, this data selected we have here, we can say, okay, the class width should be 5. And the lowest value should be 10. The class limit will be 10. And the highest value should be 30. We have 33. So it should be 35. So we need to set all this. So let's go through the steps now. So the guidelines for determining the number of classes, always they say we should use between 5 to 20 classes. In some questions, the requirement will be given that we need 7 classes, we need 10 classes. If it's not given, then you have to make your own educated judgment. You can take somewhere between 5 to 20, depends on the quantity of data you have. For example, if I have a data set values over 2000, I may not choose 5. And it depends on the range of the values also. You have to consider that. So data sets with larger number of elements usually require a larger number of classes, as we said, the range of the data. Then smaller data sets usually require fewer classes. Now the goal is to use enough classes to show the variation in the data. So we need enough classes so that we can see the pattern in the data set, the variations, but not so many classes that some contain only a few data items. So this is just a suggestions. Now this is the step. The guideline for determining the width of the class. We use classes of equal width. So again, the width have to be constant. Then to approximate the class width, we look at the largest data value in the data set and the smallest data value. So this is like finding the range. The largest value minus the smallest value divided by the number of classes. So we select, first of all, we need to select how many classes we want. So if we select 7 classes, I'll look for the largest value and the minimum value, find the difference and divide by number of classes. Now that will give me the class width. Then I have to make the judgment, depends on the starting value and the ending value, the smallest and the largest value. Then we get the class limit. Then we add it to the class width. From there, we have our guideline for each class. But again, we are going to use Excel here. So we will do the lab work again in a few minutes. So here we say the number of classes and the class width. In practice, the number of classes and appropriate class width are determined by try and error. So you have to make your educated decision. Then once a possible number of classes is chosen, the appropriate class width is found. Then the process can be repeated for different number of classes. Again, I'm going to do the lab work in a few minutes now. So that's the guidelines for determining the class width. Again, the class limit must be chosen so that each data item belongs to one and only one class. We don't want one data to belong to 2 classes, so we should have the class limit. So we may have the upper class limit based on the smallest value we have, and also based on the larger value that we have for upper. Then we also have the lower class limit based on the smallest value we have. Then in some cases, we also can find the class midpoint. The class midpoint actually will help us to come up with the histogram concept. So the class midpoint is the value halfway between the lower and upper class limits in each class. So this is example here. Again, we are going to use Excel here. So, but this is just to give the idea. So to find the class width, we look at the largest value in the data set. It was 33. The smallest value was 12. We divided to choose 5 classes. So we divide by 5. The answer is 4.2. We approximate it to 4. We know the number of classes have to be a whole number, counting. So here we can see that means our class width is what, 4. We start from 10. So we say 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, which means when you see all these classes, the class width is 4 for each class. Then from here, we look at our data set. So how many clients days, the number of days for audit is between 10 to 14. We found out is 4. Between 15 to 19 is 8. Between 20 to 24 is 5. 25 to 29, 2 and 1. So again, this is how we construct frequency distribution for quantitative data. Most important is we need to find the class. We need to determine the class. The number of class depends on our own judgment. I may choose 6 classes and I may come up with different. So when I choose 6 classes, you can see that the class width will reduce. If I choose 4 or 3, the class width will increase. So it's up to us. Now, when we know the number of classes, then we can find the class width. Then based on the smallest and the largest value in the data set, we begin our lower class limit and had, if the lower class limit start from, because our smallest value is 12, we decided to start from 10. And the class rate is 4, so we had 4 to 10. The answer we get next, we start to 15. We don't want to overlap, so I will not go 10 to 14 and then 14 to 18. No, that means 14 may belong to 2 classes. We want each value to belong to only 1 class. So 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24, etc. So normally in the regular statistics class where we don't use no software, we do this by our hand, pen and paper. But here again, we are going to use Excel. So this is the Excel steps. Select any cell in the data set, click insert on the ribbon. In the table, we use the pivot table. Then create a pivot table, almost same steps as the previous qualitative data. Now the difference is we are going to select grouping. So these are all the steps. So step 5, in the pivot table field, click dialog box. In the dialog box or the pivot table field, we are going to drag the audit time to the rows area, then audit time to the values area. Then we click on the sum value. This is the text box sum of the audit time in the values area. Again, we are going to do these steps right now. So I'm going to move straight to start the steps. So when we do the step, this is what we get. And that's something that we're going to do for a second right now. So this will be our, again, classes, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, the relative frequency. Then here we use the formula same as qualitative data, find the relative frequency of each category, which will be the number here is 4. We have 4 between 10 to 14. So we divide 4 by the total, which is 20. Then whatever the value is here, the frequency, we divide the frequency by total value 20 again. So now let's go and do our steps. So here I'm going to use a file name. We are going to use the file name audit. So I'm going to click on the audit. And so we click on the file name audit. And then so now we have all the 20 clients. Then next we go to insert. Then we click on the pivot table. And we leave everything as it is. Here they say select a table or range. On a new, we choose it on there. So we click OK. Then our main goal, again, remember we are doing audit time. This is the variable for our data. So I will drag the audit time to rows. So again, I'm moving the audit time, drag it to rows. So right now I have the rows for the audit time. Then I will drag audit time also, the same audit time to values. So we have the values. Now, this will be the whole concept that we are trying to do now, but now we have our frequency distribution with 2 columns, but we haven't finished here. As we said in the theory, we are going to have a grouping. We are going to set a grouping. So here I'm going to click on the sum. This is where our value is. So I'll click on the here. And remember, we want to create again what we call the grouping. So we click on the sum of the audit time in the values area. Then we are going to click the value field setting. So we click on the value field setting. Then when we click on the value field setting dialog box, we are going to choose count because we're going to count again, finding the frequency. The frequency is count. Again, first we have our pivot table. Then the data set is only one variable, audit time. So we take the audit time to the rows and audit time to the values. And we click the down arrow under the values. And here we are going to find the frequency. So frequency means count. If I'm looking for average or mean, mass again. So since I click on the count, the next step, I'm going to click OK, finish with there. So now we can see our data. So here we are zooming, there's no grouping. We have how many clients to take 12 days is 1, 13 is 1, 14 is 2, etc. Because as we said, counting is frequency. So same thing as we did in qualitative, I can change the label to, let's say, audit or audit days. And also we can change the second to frequency. Always we call it frequency. So, and one thing also is that we haven't finished. Now we want to set our class. What we did is almost same as doing the qualitative. But now we want to set the class interval. So setting the class interval, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the A4. I'll right click on the A4. Then when I right click on the A4, I need to choose group. I want to create an interval grouping. So I choose group. Now the interval now is the same as we did manually. We select from 10 and we say the class weight is 14. The same thing I'm going to do here. So here it's up to us where we want to start. I want to start from 10. And also I'm going to end it. It depends on where we want to end it, but let's end it at 34. Let's end it at 34 because the highest value, the lowest value was 12, and the highest value is 33. So 34 is okay. Then we want the class width to be softwares. Let's use 5. So I'm going to change it to 5. So what I'm doing here, I right click on A4, that's the first value, and I'm setting the class now. I want to class beginning is 10, the last should be 34. And the class width, I decided I'm using 5. Then I click OK. So this is same as the result we got in the slide. So between 10 to 14, we have 4 clients. Between 15 to 19, 8. We can see that the class width is the same throughout. 30 to 34, we have 1. So again, this is the whole concept of constructing again a frequency distribution using quantitative data. So again, wish everybody the best. We can go back to the result here. So this is what we did. And again, that's the steps here also. So later we get this result. And wish everybody the best. Again, thank you.